The spotlight slammed down like a judge's gavel. Heat rushed across the stage, bleaching the world white, turning the auditorium into a faceless roar. Somewhere beyond the blinding lights, thousands of people were laughing, some nervously, some cruelly, some already filming on their phones. The sound rolled forward in waves, crashing into the girl standing alone at center stage. She was small, 16, maybe 17. Dark skin glowing under the lights, braids pulled back too tight, knuckles white around the microphone she'd been forced to hold. "Go on," the man said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Sing." The famous singer, everyone knew his name. A living legend, multi-platinum records, awards that sparkled brighter than the stage lights now burning into her eyes. He crossed one designer's shoe over the other and smirked, the corner of his mouth curling like he'd already won. "Sing," he repeated, louder this time. "Or are you shy?" Laughter exploded again. The girl swallowed. Her throat felt like it was lined with sand. She could hear her own heartbeat through the microphone, loud and traitorous. Thump, thump, thump. "Aye," her voice cracked. She stopped herself, squeezed her eyes shut for half a second, then opened them again. From the judges' panel, another celebrity leaned toward the famous singer and whispered something. He laughed, shook his head, then turned back to her. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, spreading his arms to the crowd, "we have a special audition today." The crowd cheered, not knowing why, not caring. "This young lady," he continued, eyes never leaving hers, "walked in here thinking she belongs on the same stage as professionals, as people who have worked their entire lives for this." He leaned forward now, elbows on his knees, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "So I thought, why not give her a chance, a real chance?" His gaze flicked to the band. "Cut them." The faint instrumental that had been playing died instantly. A murmur rippled through the audience. "No backing track," he said sweetly. "No choir, no help, just you." He pointed directly at her chest. "Sing it solo." The girl's fingers trembled around the mic. She glanced toward the wings of the stage, where contestants usually waited, where comfort lived, friends, family, someone. But there was no one, just darkness. "This isn't fair," someone muttered from the crowd. The famous singer heard it. He smiled wider. "Fair," he chuckled. "This is the industry, sweetheart. You want fame, you better get used to standing alone." He tilted his head. "Unless you want to walk off the stage right now." A few people laughed again, louder this time. The girl felt something hot sting behind her eyes. She forced it down. Crying would be exactly what he wanted. She lifted her chin, even though her knees felt like they might fold. "I can sing," she said quietly. The famous singer burst out laughing. "Oh, I'm sure you think you can." He turned to the audience. "Did you hear that? She thinks she can sing." More laughter, phones lifted higher. "Okay," he said, standing now, commanding the room without even trying. "Show us." Silence fell heavy, expectant. The girl took a breath, then another, her lips parted. The first note came out soft, too soft. The famous singer winced dramatically, clapping a hand to his ear. "Oh no, oh no, 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 this is painful." Heat rushed to her face. "Sing up," he barked. "Object, or is this as loud as it gets?" She tightened her grip on the mic and tried again, pushing more air through her chest. The note wavered, shaky with nerves. He shook his head slowly, like a disappointed parent. "See," he said to the judges, "this is exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone wants to be a star, but nobody wants to do the work." He turned back to her. "Who told you you were good?" The question sliced deeper than any insult. She didn't answer. "I asked you something," he pressed. "Was it your mama, your friends, or did you just wake up one day and decide talent was optional?" The audience gasped. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes burned. Still, she said nothing. "That's what I thought," he said coldly. "Another kid chasing a dream they don't deserve." Something shifted inside her then, not anger, something steadier, quieter, like a door closing. She lifted her eyes and looked straight at him. "I'd like to start again," she said. The famous singer raised an eyebrow. "Oh, feeling brave now." "I just need one clean start," she replied. Her voice was firmer this time, calmer. He laughed, shaking his head. "You're already embarrassing yourself, but by all means, dig the hole deeper." He waved his hand dismissively. "Go ahead." She closed her eyes. The crowd hushed, sensing something, though they didn't know what. The famous singer folded his arms, unimpressed, already bored. Then she sang. The note didn't shake this time. It soared, clear, strong, impossible to ignore. The sound filled the room, rich and full, cutting through the air like light through clouds. Conversations died mid-whisper. A judge's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. The famous singer's smile faltered. The girl moved into the next note effortlessly, her voice climbing higher, stronger, doing something that made the walls feel too small to hold it. It wasn't just singing, it was control, precision, power. People in the audience leaned forward without realizing it. Phones stopped moving. The famous singer straightened slowly. She hit another note higher still, Clean, fearless, a murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. That's, someone whispered. That's not possible. The famous singer took a step closer to the stage, eyes narrowing. She transitioned into a run so smooth it felt like silk, her voice dancing between notes with an ease that didn't come from practice rooms or vocal coaches. It came from somewhere deeper, from survival, from truth. Her final note rang out, hanging in the air, unbroken, unwavering. Silence followed, the kind of silence that roars louder than applause. The girl lowered the microphone slowly, chest rising and falling. The famous singer stared at her. For the first time since she'd walked onto that stage, he didn't look amused. He looked unsettled. He cleared his throat. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. That was cute. A few people gasped. Cute, he repeated louder now, like saying it twice would make it true. But don't get carried away. Tricks don't make an artist. Boos began to rise from the audience. He shot them a sharp look. Relax, I know talent when I hear it. He turned back to her, voice lowering. And I also know when someone's getting lucky. Lucky, the word hung there, ugly and dismissive. You think hitting a few high notes makes you special? He asked. I've forgotten more about music than you'll ever know. The girl met his gaze. I wasn't trying to be special, she said quietly. I was just singing. The crowd murmured again. Something flickered in his eyes, threatened pride maybe. He smiled, but it didn't reach them. Oh, sweetheart, he said softly, dangerously. If you think that was impressive, he leaned toward the microphone on the judge's table. Then you clearly don't know who you're standing in front of. The band members shifted uneasily. He picked up his own mic. Let me show you, he said, voice smooth as oil, how it's really done. A wave of excitement rolled through the audience. The famous singer lifted the microphone to his lips. And that was when the girl smiled, not wide, not arrogant, just calm, like someone who knew something the rest of the room didn't. Because what no one in that auditorium knew, not the judges, not the crowd, and certainly not the famous singer, was that the notes she'd just hit were the easy ones, and the voice she'd just revealed wasn't even close to her limit. Question of the day: have you ever been laughed at or underestimated right before you proved everyone wrong? Tell us your story in the comments, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. But before we see how this ends, let's go back to where this story truly began. 3 months earlier, long before the spotlight burned her eyes, long before the famous singer's laughter cut into her chest, before the world decided to look at her at all. The girl's name was Amara Collins. Every morning, Amara woke up before the sun, not because she wanted to, but because the house demanded it. The old alarm clock on the cracked bedside table buzzed at 4:45 a.m., its sound sharp and unforgiving. Amara would reach out with sleepy fingers, silence it, then lie still for exactly 5 seconds, staring at the ceiling where water stains formed shapes she'd memorized since childhood. 5 seconds to dream, then reality. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, peeling paint, floors that creaked like tired bones. In the winter, the cold slipped through the walls no matter how high the heater was turned. In the summer, the air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on everything. Amara shared her room with her little brother, Malik. He was 10, all elbows and curiosity, his school backpack always missing a zipper. She moved quietly so she wouldn't wake him, pulling on her hoodie-worn sneakers and the same faded jeans she rotated all week. In the kitchen, her mother sat at the small table, already dressed for work. Her uniform, navy blue scrubs, was neatly folded at the seams, though the fabric had grown thin with time. A cup of coffee steamed in front of her, untouched. "You're up early again," her mother said gently, even though it was the same conversation every morning. "I couldn't sleep," Amara replied, grabbing a piece of toast. Her mother studied her face, the shadows under her eyes. "You were singing last night." Amara froze for half a second. "Sorry, I'll keep it down." Her mother smiled sadly. "That's not what I meant, baby." She reached across the table and squeezed Amara's hand. Her fingers were rough, years of cleaning hospital floors, scrubbing things other people didn't want to think about. "You don't have to apologize for your gift," her mother said. "Don't let it steal your rest." Amara nodded, though they both knew rest wasn't really the problem. Music had always lived in her chest. As long as she could remember, she didn't know where it came from, not exactly. Her mother said Amara used to hum before she could talk, that she'd cry in tune, matching pitches without knowing what they were. Her father used to laugh about it before he left. There were no framed records on the walls, no famous relatives. Just an old, battered radio that sat on the counter, its antenna bent at an awkward angle. That radio was Amara's first teacher. She sang along to everything: gospel, soul, pop, jazz, memorizing melodies the way other kids memorized math tables. At school, teachers noticed her voice early. So did other students. Not all attention was kind. "You trying to be famous or something?" one girl had sneered when Amara volunteered to sing at a school assembly. "Who do you think you are?" Another kid laughed. "You sound like you're doing too much." But sometimes, the room would go quiet when she sang. Teachers would forget to grade papers. Kids would stop whispering. Those moments were oxygen. Still, talent didn't pay bills. By 16, Amara worked weekends at a grocery store, bagging food for customers who rarely looked her in the eye. She saved every dollar she could. College applications weren't cheap, and neither were dreams. Her urgent problem wasn't just money. It was time. Her mother's health had started to slip. Long shifts, double overtime, stress piled on stress. Some nights, Amara lay awake listening for her mother's breathing, afraid of what silence might mean. Music wasn't just a dream, it was a way out. Not just for her, but for all of them. That's when she saw the audition ad. It popped up on her cracked phone screen late one night. Nation's biggest singing competition, open auditions. Judges included industry legends. Famous singer's face dominated the image, sunglasses on, smile confident. Winner gets a recording contract, national exposure, a chance. Amara stared at the screen until her eyes burned. She laughed at first, a short, humorless sound. "Yeah, right," she whispered to herself. Those shows weren't for girls like her. She'd watched enough episodes to know the pattern. Big personalities, tragic stories packaged neatly for TV. People who already looked like stars, but the thought wouldn't leave her alone. What if this was the only door she'd ever get? She printed the audition form at the library, filling it out slowly, carefully, like it might disappear if she rushed. When she told her mother, there was a long silence. "Baby," her mother said, rubbing her temples, "those things chew people up." "I know," Amara replied, "but I can't not try." Her mother searched her face, then nodded. "Okay, but promise me something." "What?" "No matter what they say, you remember who you are." Audition day came faster than Amara expected. The city auditorium loomed like a monument when she arrived, glass, steel, banners flapping in the wind. Hundreds of people crowded the entrance, voices buzzing with excitement and nerves. Some wore designer clothes. Some had vocal coaches trailing behind them. Amara stood near the back of the line, clutching her number. She felt invisible. Inside, the halls echoed with warm-ups, runs, scales, laughter. Posters of past winners lined the walls. Every face smiling, every face confident, her stomach twisted. She watched contestant after contestant disappear behind the audition doors, some emerging in tears, others cheering. Then it was her turn. A stagehand handed her a mic and gestured forward. "Go!" She stepped into the light. That was the moment. The famous singer sat there exactly as he did now, relaxed, powerful, untouchable. He glanced at her form, barely looking up. "Name?" he asked. "Amara Collins," she said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Song choice?" she told him. He smirked. "Interesting." She didn't know what that meant then. She would soon, because from the moment she opened her mouth, something in his expression changed, not to admiration, but to challenge, as if her voice wasn't supposed to come from her, as if it offended him, and that was why he decided to make an example of her, why he cut the music, why he forced her to sing solo, why he mocked her in front of millions. To remind her where he believed she belonged. What Amara didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that this audition wasn't just about talent. It was about pride, and the famous singer had never forgiven anyone who threatened his. The hallway outside the main audition chamber felt colder than the rest of the building. Amara stood just beyond the stage entrance, her contestant number folded and unfolded so many times it was soft as cloth. Voices echoed from inside, applause, laughter, sometimes sharp criticism that made people flinch even before the words fully landed. She tried not to listen. "Next contestant, Amara Collins." Her chest tightened. This was it. She stepped forward, each footfall sounding louder than it should have. The heavy black curtain brushed against her arm as she passed through, and suddenly she was no longer a girl from a small house with peeling paint. She was a figure under lights, exposed, measured. The auditorium stretched wide before her. Rows of seats faded into darkness, filled with people who held opinions sharper than knives. Cameras hovered like watchful insects. The judge's table gleamed under its own spotlight, and there he was. The famous singer didn't look at her at first. He was whispering to another judge, laughing softly. When he finally glanced up, his eyes flicked over her, quick, dismissive. Something in Amara's stomach dropped. "Step forward," a producer said quietly. She obeyed, stopping at the taped mark on the floor. The famous singer scanned her audition form, lips pursed. 16, he read aloud. "No formal training." He looked up now, really looked. His gaze lingered on her braids, her worn hoodie, her sneakers that had seen better days. "Ahem," he said. One of the judges smiled politely. "Whenever you're ready, Amara." The band began the intro soft, steady. Amara closed her eyes, just like she always did in her room late at night. Imagine the cracked ceiling, the radio humming low. She breathed in, she sang. The first line flowed easily, warm and controlled. Her nerves settled as the melody wrapped around her. This was where she belonged, but halfway through the first verse, the famous singer raised his hand. Stop! The music cut abruptly. Amara's eyes snapped open. Yes, she asked, unsure. He leaned back, fingers steepled. What exactly are you doing? I'm singing, she said. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. He smiled thinly. No, you're trying to sing. Heat crept up her neck. I'd like you to do something different, he continued. Lose the music. The other judges exchanged glances. That's not really how one began. I want to hear her, he interrupted smoothly. Not the band, he turned back to Amara. Unless you're afraid. The word landed heavy. I'm not, she said quietly. Good, he gestured. Start again, solo. That was when the room shifted. The band members froze. The producer hesitated. This wasn't standard, not for auditions this early. Solo performances were reserved for special moments or punishments. Amara felt the weight of it immediately. Singing without music stripped everything bare. There was nowhere to hide, not pitch, not breath, not fear. Still, she nodded. She started again. Her voice wavered at first, the echo of the large room throwing her off balance. She adjusted, grounding herself, finding the note. The famous singer winced theatrically. Oh no, he said, laughing into his mic. This is rough. Her heart pounded. Projection, Amara, he said sharply. You can't whisper your way to fame, she sang louder. Still not enough, he said. Sing like you mean it, or is this your limit? A murmur rose from the audience. Some faces showed sympathy, others amusement. She pushed harder, voice trembling under the pressure. There, he said, clapping slowly. See what happens when you try too hard? He leaned forward. You're straining. That tells me you don't really understand your instrument. Amara swallowed. May I finish? He tilted his head. Convince me it's worth my time. She finished the verse, chest tight, throat burning. When she stopped, the silence felt crueler than applause. The famous singer shook his head. I'm going to be honest with you. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. This industry is brutal, he continued. And it doesn't care about potential. It cares about polish, about star quality. His eyes swept over her again. And some people just don't have it. The words struck like a slap. Thank you for coming, he said, already looking down at his notes. That should have been it. Amara stood there, stunned, dismissal ringing in her ears. She could feel tears threatening, her body betraying her. Then she heard it, a laugh, not from the crowd, from him. He looked up again, curiosity flickering. Actually, wait. Hope flared, traitorous and bright. Yes, she asked. He smiled, not kindly. You know what, he said. Let's make this interesting. He stood, commanding the room without effort. You think you can sing, then show us something impressive. The audience leaned in. High notes, he said casually. Real ones, not those airy little sounds. One of the judges stiffened. That's risky. She'll be fine, he cut in. Won't you, Amara? She hesitated. If you crack, he added lightly, that tells us everything we need to know. Her heart raced. This wasn't an audition anymore. It was a test designed for her to fail. I can, she began. Good, he said. No excuses. He sat back down, folding his arms. Go on. The room felt smaller, hotter. She took a breath, then another, reaching for a note she usually saved for the end, one that demanded control and confidence. She sang. The sound rang out, clear but thin at first. She adjusted, anchoring her breath, lifting the tone. The famous singer raised an eyebrow, surprised despite himself. She climbed higher. A hush fell over the crowd. But then fatigue crept in, her chest tightened. The note wobbled just a fraction. There it is, he said loudly. You hear that? A few people nodded. That's what happens when you overreach, he continued. You don't belong up there. Something snapped inside her. She stopped singing. The silence that followed was sharp, uncomfortable. She looked straight at him. May I start again? He laughed. You already did. I didn't, she said calmly. Not the way I wanted. Famous singer's smile faded. This is my stage, he said coldly. You don't make demands here. She nodded slowly. Then I'll make a request. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. He leaned forward. Careful. Just one clean start, she said. No commentary, no interruptions. The room held its breath. For a moment it looked like he might say no, might crush her just to prove he could. Then he smiled again, sharp, dangerous. Fine, he said. But when you fail, don't say I didn't. That was how it began, the final confrontation, the moment he meant to humiliate her completely. What he didn't realize, what no one in that room realized, was that Amara had spent her entire life singing over noise, over doubt, over laughter, over people telling her she didn't belong. This time she was ready. The famous singer lifted his hand. The room froze. Before you start, he said, voice smooth but edged with warning, let's be clear about something. Amara stood motionless at center stage, microphone steady in her hands. Her breathing was slow now, deliberate. The shaking had stopped. This is your last chance, he continued. No excuses, no sympathy. He leaned closer to his mic. If you fail, you walk out of here knowing exactly why. The audience murmured uneasily. Amara nodded once. I understand. Good. He waved his hand. Go. She closed her eyes. The world fell away. She didn't see the cameras, didn't hear the whispering crowd. Didn't feel the weight of judgment pressing in from every side. She thought of her mother at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold. Of Malik asleep on the other side of the room. Of nights singing softly into a pillow so no one would complain. She inhaled. The first note came out low, grounded, full. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to be. It was honest. The famous singer tilted his head, listening despite himself. She moved through the melody slowly, deliberately, each note placed with care. Her voice grew richer, warmer, filling the space in a way that felt less like performance and more like confession. The crowd stilled, then she shifted. Without warning, she modulated upward, smooth, seamless, her voice climbing with a strength that made heads lift. The sound thickened, vibrating through the floor, the seats, the bones of the building itself. A judge's eyes widened. Amara's face remained calm. She pushed higher. The famous singer straightened. Higher still. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. This wasn't strain. This wasn't luck, this was mastery. She reached a note so clear and sustained it felt impossible, holding it steady, shaping it, bending it gently as if it were clay in her hands. The famous singer's mouth parted. The note climbed again. One of the judges whispered, "That's above." Amara didn't stop. She transitioned into a run so complex it demanded perfect control, every pitch locked in, every breath measured. Her voice didn't crack, didn't waver, it soared. The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause, then fell silent again as she lifted her hands slightly, asking for stillness. She wasn't finished. Her final note rose higher than anything she'd sung before, not forced, not shouted, pure. It rang out, filling every corner of the room, shimmering with power and precision. She held it. 5 seconds, 10. People stared, frozen. The famous singer's face drained of color. She released the note gently, letting it fade into the silence. The microphone lowered. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the room exploded. Cheers thundered from every direction. People leapt to their feet. Judges stared at one another in disbelief. The famous singer remained seated, staring. "That's," one judge breathed. "That's unreal." Amara stood still, chest rising and falling, eyes open now, clear, steady. The famous singer cleared his throat. "Well," he said, forcing a laugh, "that was dramatic." Boos erupted. He shot the audience a sharp look. "Relax. I'm just saying high notes aren't everything." He turned to Amara, his smile brittle. "You got lucky." Something shifted in the room. Amara met his gaze. "No," she said quietly, "I didn't." The famous singer's eyes flashed. "Excuse me?" "I didn't get lucky," she repeated. "I trained, I listened, I learned," he scoffed. "From where? Your bedroom?" A few uncomfortable laughs sounded. "Yes," she said, "from my bedroom, from the radio. Church basements and grocery store aisles and anywhere I could sing without being told to stop." The room hushed. "And from someone you know," she added. That got his attention. He frowned. "I don't know you." She tilted her head slightly. "No, but you know him." A murmur rippled through the judges. The famous singer's expression hardened. "I don't have time for riddles." Before he could continue, a voice rang out from the side of the stage. "That's enough." Heads turned. A man in a dark suit stepped into the light. Gray at the temples, calm, commanding presence. A producer hurried behind him, whispering urgently. The famous singer stiffened. "What is this?" The man walked toward the judge's table, eyes never leaving Amara. "Sir," the producer began, "this is—" "I know who he is," the man said. His voice was steady, unmistakable. "And he knows who I am." The famous singer swallowed. "Mr. Reynolds," he said cautiously, "this is a closed audition." The man, Reynolds, smiled thinly. "Not when it involves my family." The room went dead silent. Amara turned slightly, surprise flickering across her face. Reynolds stepped up beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "This," he said, voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium, "is my niece." Gasps echoed. The famous singer stared. "That's not possible." Reynolds nodded toward Amara. "Her father, my brother, passed years ago, but before he did, he made sure she had the best ear training money couldn't buy." The famous singer's brow furrowed. "I don't." Reynolds leaned forward. "You taught him." The famous singer went pale. "You mentored my brother," Reynolds continued, "before fame changed you, before you forgot where you came from." The judges whispered frantically. "And when my brother died," Reynolds said softly, "you promised you'd look out for his family." The famous singer's mouth opened, closed. Amara's voice was quiet when she spoke. I never wanted special treatment. Reynolds nodded. And you never asked for it. Famous singer stood abruptly. This is highly inappropriate. Reynolds met his gaze evenly. What's inappropriate is humiliating a gifted young woman because her talent threatened your ego. The crowd erupted again, this time with anger. The famous singer looked around, cornered. And one more thing, Reynolds added. Those notes she just hit, he smiled. You've never hit them, not once, not in your career. Silence slammed into the room. The famous singer sank back into his chair. The truth was out. The silence after the revelation didn't feel empty. It felt heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. The famous singer sat frozen, hands gripping the edges of the judge's table as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. His confident posture had collapsed inward, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. The smirk that once lived so easily on his face was gone, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. Fear. The audience whispered openly now. No one bothered to hide it. That's his niece. Mentored her father? Did he really say he never hit those notes? Amara stood still, the weight of the moment settling over her slowly. She hadn't planned for this, not the reveal, not the public reckoning. All she had wanted was a fair chance. Reynolds stepped forward again, his voice calm but unyielding. You humiliated her, he said, looking directly at the famous singer. Not because she lacked talent, but because she had too much. The famous singer scoffed weakly. That's ridiculous. Is it? One of the judges asked sharply. She had been quiet all day, but now her eyes were blazing. You interrupted her performance. You changed the rules mid-audition. You pushed her beyond standard protocol. Another judge nodded. You didn't do that to anyone else. The famous singer opened his mouth, then closed it again. Reynolds turned to the panel. This show claims to discover raw talent, to protect it. Is that still true? The head producer stood, adjusting his tie nervously. We, of course. That's our mission. Then act like it, Reynolds said. The famous singer stood abruptly. You're all overreacting. This is television. Drama sells. A wave of boos crashed over him. Amara flinched slightly, not out of pity, but because she wasn't used to seeing power stripped so quickly. The head producer raised a hand. Enough! The room quieted. He turned to the famous singer. Effective immediately, you're suspended from judging pending a full review. Gasps erupted. You can't do that, the famous singer snapped. I am this show. The producer met his gaze steadily. No, you were a part of it. Security stepped closer. The famous singer's face flushed deep red. This is a mistake. Reynolds spoke again, quieter now. No, this is accountability. The famous singer looked around, searching for allies. He found none, not in the judges, not in the audience. Finally, his eyes landed on Amara. For a moment, something flickered there, regret maybe, or calculation. You didn't need to do this, he said, voice low. You could have asked. Amara met his gaze without flinching. I shouldn't have to ask for respect. The words landed harder than any shout. Security escorted the famous singer off the stage amid a mix of stunned silence and applause. The man who had commanded the room just minutes earlier now walked with his head down, swallowed by the shadows. When he was gone, the atmosphere shifted. It felt lighter. One of the judges stood and approached Amara. I owe you an apology, she said sincerely. We should have stopped it sooner. Amara nodded. Thank you. The head producer turned to her. Amara Collins, if you're willing, we'd like you to continue in the competition. The crowd erupted into cheers. Tears welled in Amara's eyes. This time she didn't fight them. I'd like that, she said softly. Reynolds stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You did beautifully. She smiled at him, a mix of gratitude and emotion in her eyes. Thank you. For stepping in. He shook his head gently. You didn't need saving, you just needed the truth to be heard. Later, backstage, the noise of the auditorium faded into a dull hum. Amara sat on a folding chair, hands still trembling slightly. A bottle of water rested between her palms, untouched. Reynolds sat beside her. You know, he said, your father would have been proud. Her throat tightened. I hope so. He believed in you, Reynolds continued, even when he knew he wouldn't be around to see this. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I sing because of him. Reynolds smiled. And because of you? A staff member approached, clipboard in hand. Amara, we're ready for your interview whenever you are. She stood, shoulders back now, not because she felt fearless, but because she felt seen. As she walked toward the lights again, the audience rose to their feet. The applause wasn't wild this time. It was deep, resonant, respectful. Justice had been served, but redemption, that came quietly. Weeks later, headlines flooded the internet. Legendary judge suspended after on-air controversy. Teen vocalist stuns nation with historic performance. The famous singer released a statement, carefully worded, vague, apologies without ownership, promises of reflection. Amara didn't read it. She was too busy rehearsing. The competition pushed her harder than she'd ever been pushed, but this time it was fair, constructive, encouraging. She grew. And with every performance, she remembered the lesson burned into her that day. Talent doesn't need permission, truth doesn't need volume, and dignity, once claimed, can't be taken away. 1 year later, the theater lights dimmed slowly, one by one, until the room glowed in a soft, amber hush. The crowd, thousands strong, fell into a reverent silence, the kind reserved not for spectacle, but for something meaningful. Backstage, Amara Collins stood in front of a full-length mirror. She barely recognized the young woman staring back at her. Her braids were styled elegantly now, framing a calm, confident face. The dress she wore wasn't flashy, no sequins, no excess, but it fit her perfectly, like it had been designed for her and no one else. Around her neck hung a small silver pendant, the same one her mother had given her years ago. Her hands were steady. A stage manager peeked around the corner. 2 minutes, Amara nodded. Thank you. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the familiar mix of nerves and excitement. But it wasn't fear this time. It was gratitude. A year ago, she had stood on a very different stage, under very different lights, fighting to be heard. That moment, the humiliation, the cruelty, the truth, had become the turning point of her life. She had gone on to finish the competition, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted growth. She didn't win the trophy. She won something better. Producers, artists, and vocal directors reached out, not because of drama, but because of respect. She signed a development deal that gave her time instead of pressure. Mentors who listened instead of belittled, space to learn who she wanted to be as an artist, and most importantly, her family was safe. Her mother no longer worked double shifts. Malik attended a school with a music program that let him explore his own talents. The house with peeling paint was gone, replaced by a small but warm home filled with laughter and music. None of it felt unreal, it felt earned. The stage manager returned. It's time. Amara stepped into the wings. The announcer's voice echoed through the theater. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amara Collins. The applause rose slowly, then thundered. She walked into the light. The audience stood. Some people clapped. Others wiped tears. Many remembered her story, not as a scandal, but as a reminder. She lifted the microphone. I want to tell you a story, she said softly. The room leaned in. Once someone tried to make me believe my voice was too much and not enough at the same time. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd. But I learned something that day, she continued. Your worth isn't decided by the loudest person in the room, it's decided by what you do when it's your turn to speak. She sang, not to impress, not to prove, but to connect. Her voice filled the theater, rich, grounded, free. Every note carried a year's worth of growth, pain, and resilience. When she reached the final high note, she didn't hold it for show, she held it for truth. The crowd erupted. Backstage, Reynolds watched from the shadows, pride shining in his eyes. Beside him stood Amara's mother, hands clasped, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. She found her way, Reynolds said softly. She always had it, her mother replied. She just needed the world to listen. Across town, in a much quieter room, the famous singer sat alone. The scandals had cost him more than a judging seat. Endorsements vanished. Invitations dried up. The industry moved on, as it always did. He watched a clip of Amara's performance on his phone. Her voice soared effortlessly through the speakers. He exhaled slowly. For the first time, there was no envy, no bitterness, only regret. Some lessons arrive too late, but they still arrive. Amara ended the night standing center stage, bowing as the applause washed over her. She smiled, not wide, not triumphant, but peaceful. Because success, she'd learned, wasn't about standing above others. It was about standing in yourself. Final moral, never let someone else's insecurity define your limits. True talent doesn't need permission, and respect is something you claim by staying true to who you are, even when the world tries to silence you. If this story moved you, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs encouragement today. And subscribe to our channel for more powerful, inspirational stories that remind us all where real strength comes from.